tell you, first of all, that I'm going to try to follow what the direction indicates in the program here, beginning to pray, and then there are two particular prayer problems that we can discuss. And I'm going to speak, therefore, for just a few minutes, and then throw the floor open for any questions that you have. I'm going to speak about beginning prayer, that is for beginners, and I trust that the question here, this conference, this workshop means by beginners in mental prayer, I presume, not just saying vocal prayers, good as they are. Is that a correct presumption? That that's what we're supposed to be doing? Okay. Now, there are lots of ways you could begin, all kinds of ways you could begin with St. Teresa's way of perfection. You could be all kinds, dozens of ways. What I'm going to do is this. I want to just give you several texts in the New Testament. They're beautiful. You can't beat God's Word. They're beautiful. And we're going to take a look with two texts at the Lord at prayer. He's the master. And then we're going to take a look at what he says about your prayer and mine with three texts. And then we're going to have two more texts about our prayer in community with one another, the community of the family, the community of the parish, and so on, or religious community, but since you are lay people, mostly it will be the community of the family and the parish. And then we're going to have one text to illustrate continual prayer by ourselves. And so that's the way we're going to start to get the framework of our discussion about beginning prayer. Now, let's take the Lord himself. The two texts that I wish to cite here, one or both of them may come up tomorrow or the next day in the General Assembly with the whole group here. But this first one is Mark 1:35. In the morning, long before dawn, he, Jesus, got up and left the house and went off into a lonely place and prayed there. Or, as another translation says, he was absorbed in prayer. Now, don't understand this text that I'm citing to you as an example of beginning prayer. This is the loftiest prayer that could possibly exist. See, so I don't mean it there. But to get the flavor of the Lord, just look at the text a little more closely. In the morning, long before dawn. That must be at least an hour before sunrise, probably 2 or 3. Now, I'm not suggesting that a beginner in prayer is going to get up at 3:30 a.m. for prayer time. There might be some beginners like that, but I want just to get the feel. You see, the Lord, first of all, and his mother next, and then all the other saints, these are men and women head over heels in love. So there's a connection between a deep prayer life and being in love. And that we want to realize from the very beginning of prayer. And beginning here doesn't mean necessarily chronological age. Okay. So we get the feel of a serious prayer life, first of all, with the Lord. Now, what he does that particular morning, long before dawn, it was probably 4 or 5 o'clock at least that he got up for prayer. And notice he makes a solitude for prayer so that he can commune more easily with the Father. Now, the second text I want to share about his prayer life is Luke's Gospel, chapter 6, verse 12. It was about this time that he, Jesus, went out into the hills to pray. Notice how he's making a solitude. See, now that applies to the home, family, marriage. You got to make a solitude. You just don't hope that it will happen. Notice in both of these texts. And we shall see another text about his advice to you and me, and married people as well, shortly. But anyhow, it was about this time that he went out into the hills to pray, and he spent the whole night in prayer to God, meaning the Father. Okay? So the example we have in Mark 1:35 is not an exceptional thing. That was the Lord's habit. And in this particular case, he spent the whole night in prayer. It's that important. And it's good to realize that from the beginning of a serious prayer life. This is important. Okay. Now that's the Lord's action. Let's take a look at his words for you and me about our prayer life. In Matthew's Gospel, chapter 6, it is a Sermon on the Mount, verse 6. When you pray, now he's talking to you, and to me, of course, and he's talking to the Pope too, everybody. When you pray, go to your private room, and when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in that secret place, that little solitude. So the Lord is saying here, when you pray, notice he uses as his example an ordinary marriage, an ordinary family. He doesn't even make explicit that nuns and monks and priests are supposed to have a solitude. That's the main reason, as we said in our talk a little while ago, for religious life. To have a way of life that is tailor-made for deep prayer to come about. Deep prayer should be in everybody's life. We've been saying that's the main theme of this, the 4 conferences I'm giving to the whole group, you see. But nonetheless, there are differences in vocation as to how effective the vocation will lead. So, but even in marriage, which is a little more difficult to have a deep prayer life in marriage, obviously, than in a monastery, but nonetheless, married people are called to this too, as I've been saying over and over. Now, in this text, notice, and this goes for beginners, you make a situation, a private room, a place in the home, in the house, where you can close the door. And you pray to the Father in secret. That's what we need for beginning meditation. We need a setting that makes it feasible, possible to do it. And as closely to the ideal as we can. Now, in marriage, of course, we had 7 children in our family, and I have an idea what a house full of kids is like. I was part of the problem, of course. But of course, if you've got a little bitty kid that's 9 months old, more or less, it doesn't matter, it's going to be mighty hard to have a solitude. I understand that. But husband and wife, they can work out something if they really want to. A lot of married people do work out something. Okay, so that's a bit of the Lord's advice to you and me. Now, the very next verse also has something else to say. In your prayers, Jesus speaking, this is Matthew 6:7, the next verse. In your prayers, do not babble as the pagans do, for they think that by using many words they will make themselves heard. Not too much vocal prayer. Now, this is easily misunderstood. Some people, I wouldn't be surprised, I don't think you will do it, but some people might go and quote me to say I'm against vocal prayer. I am not. I say lots of vocal prayer every day. The Liturgy of the Hours is vocal prayer, and it takes about an hour a day for that. I'm not opposed, but don't have too many of them. There are many people, and I find it among religious, and I find it among lay people too. I find that the only way they know how to improve their prayer life is to add more prayers. And some of them have just litanies after litanies, and this prayer and that prayer, and they don't have any time, really, or don't give any time to meditative prayer. That's one of the main things I'd like to say to you this afternoon. And I won't say it much because I want to invite questions for the most part, but it's extremely important what the Lord says here. Do not babble. Lots of words, one vocal prayer after another, like the pagans do, because they think that by using many words, they will make themselves heard. We need this deepening prayer that we're talking about in the 4 conferences. And it's good for beginners in prayer to realize that where they're going. Okay? All right. Now, the next thing I'd like to cite here, the Psalm 1, verses 1 and 2, which are the 2 verses with which the book of prayer, the inspired book of prayer, begins. And it talks about meditation. Isn't that interesting? Which is our subject. Happy the man, the woman, who ponders the word of the Lord, meditates on the word of the Lord day and night. So there is a kind of prayer that does take a lot of time, as much as we can give to it, and that's meditative prayer. So that fits perfectly with what the Lord says. Don't multiply the vocal ones too much, but give ample time to meditative prayer for all the reasons we just talking about 45 minutes, a little while ago. We were giving some of the reasons. We have some more to do, and we will do the other reasons that we're taking tomorrow. Okay. Psalm 27, verse 4, I have cited in the other conferences, so I'll just mention it here. The one thing I ask, the one thing I seek, is to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, and to gaze on the beauty of the Lord. That's a perfect definition of contemplative prayer. Now, the beginner in prayer is not yet usually in contemplative prayer. So I'm not citing it for that reason. I'm citing it because it's good for beginners to know where the goal is and where are we going with this prayer life. And that's the one thing, the most important thing we have to do in our lives, is to be immersed in the Trinity in this deep contemplative immersion in God. And it's good, I repeat, for the beginner to realize that. Now, that brings us then to our last two texts before I open the floor for your questions. And I do want, by the way, to answer or make a couple of comments before the afternoon is over, or that is, our hour is over, about the dealing with dryness and distraction that's in the program. You probably noticed that. I want to say at least a little bit about that because it's part of the title. Okay, now, the last two texts I want to cite. Also important for beginners. I mean, it's important for people very much advanced as well, you see. Namely, Matthew 18, verses 19 and 20. Says the Lord, this is the chapter, by the way, on the church in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 18. Verses 19 and 20. I tell you solemnly once again, if two of you on earth agree to ask anything at all, it will be granted to you by my Father in heaven. Now, this verse especially. For where two or three meet in my name, I shall be there with them in a special kind of presence. So when husband and wife meet, and especially when they meet for prayer, there's a special presence of the Lord. And when if they're children and they meet, there's a special presence of the Lord in that family. We are meeting right now in His name. The Lord is especially, in a special manner, present in our midst right now, because we're meeting in His name. Okay, so community prayer is also very important. And then one text that sets our stage here, our atmosphere, as well as the stage in a way, is Ephesians 5, verses 18 to 20. Oh, I got Galatians. No wonder I didn't see the text. Ephesians 5, 18 to 20. Be filled with the Spirit. Notice that totality we spoke of yesterday, about God is always total with you and me. Now notice here, Paul doesn't say, well, have the Spirit about 83%. Oh no, filled. He always wants to give everything, but he won't force it on anybody. We've got to want it, and want it with our decisions, not simply our words. Okay. Be filled with the Spirit. Sing the words and tunes of the psalms and hymns when you are together, and go on singing and chanting in your hearts, so that always and everywhere you are giving thanks to God who is our Father. Continual prayer. And so notice, in that verse you've got both the community prayer, it looks like a liturgical celebration, probably the Mass, you see. Sing the words and tunes of the psalms and hymns when you are together. And notice, in the same sentence, there's only a comma there, and go on. Continual prayer. So that Paul envisions when the faithful leave liturgical worship, they don't stop praying. They continue to pray individually as they have been praying together. You might say, well, then how do you get your work done? Well, of course, that's a very good answer to that. And one of the answers is, as I said yesterday, I think I did, the transforming union, where God gives a continual awareness of Himself down deep. And so the person is praying and not neglecting anything else. However, that is not beginning prayer by a long shot. So we won't go into that any further right now. But what we do want to notice is that there's a need for community prayer. Church, this is one reason we must attend Mass at least on Sundays and holy days, at least that. And there are a lot of reasons why Sunday Mass is extremely, daily Mass if possible, is extremely beneficial. And we continue to pray as much as we can without neglecting other people until God gives us that deep immersion that doesn't involve any neglect to anybody. Now, those then are some comments about, or comments in view of giving a context for the questions that you might have about beginning prayer. Now, would you like, show me, in a moment, just show me your hands, I'll ask you a question. Would you like me to respond to that part of the title of this workshop, Dryness and Distractions, dealing with them? Would you like me to say a couple of things? Okay. Oh, is that the main reason you're here? Oh. Well, okay, then the first thing I'm going to talk about is going to surprise you, I think. Let's talk about the distractions. Distractions are not nearly the problem that most people think they are. Now, let me explain that. I'm not saying that, well, then in that case, the more distractions you have, the better off. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I presume we are talking about unwilled distractions. We don't really want them, but boy, they're there, you see, maybe in abundance. Distractions that you don't willingly cause or nurture are not really much of an impediment at all to your prayer. And that's an important thing for me to say, and hopefully for you to realize. I'm not saying distractions that are unwilled are therefore wonderful, let's have more. I'm not saying that at all. Let me give you the way St. Teresa put it. She knew about distractions. She talks about them, even how she was very much distracted at times in her prayer. Distractions of this type prove two things. One is that you're human, and therefore these things are going to pop into your mind. Number two, they prove you're not yet in the prayer of the fifth mansions of Teresa, the prayer of a deep absorption. It's very deep contemplative prayer. It's so deep that distractions disappear. Okay? So your distractions at prayer, mine, prove those two things. They do not prove your prayer is bad. And the way Teresa put that point, she had a remarkable talent for hitting things on right on the target. She said, your will is with His Majesty. And after all, that's sanctity. So that if you're at prayer, you're very much distracted, you do your peaceful best to come back from the distraction, you're in great shape. Because your will is with the Lord. And you're doing exactly what you should be doing. And your prayer is not bad because distracted. Okay? Now, it's another thing if you knowingly distract yourself or you don't try to come back peacefully. Be peaceful about it. Don't be uptight about your distractions. It'd be another thing if you nourish those distractions or deliberately entertain them. And that's another thing. Now, any questions about that so far?
That I read suggested that you pray through those distractions, in essence giving them back to the Lord. Is that a valid way to handle them or not?
Yeah, let me repeat the question, though I think everybody probably heard you, maybe better than they'll hear me. You have a good voice. But anyhow, the suggestion is being made that some people say you handle distractions, sometimes at least, by just turning the distraction to the Lord and start praying about that. Correct? I think that could be good at times, at least. I'm not so sure, though, that it would always be the way to go. I'll make up an example. Suppose I'm wondering, during morning prayer time, mental prayer, I'm wondering about if we're going to have ham and eggs for breakfast. I don't think I'd make ham and eggs my subject of prayer. By the way, I don't eat either of them. They're off my diet. But in any event, now, at times, it depends where a person is in mental prayer. You see, if one is in contemplative prayer, I think often the better thing to do is just peacefully come back to the Lord. Kind of draw yourself together peacefully, and if He's giving you that yearning for Himself or a kind of delightful awareness of His presence, I just wouldn't, I don't think I'd think about something else in that case. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, good. Any other? Yeah.
I hear more people say that rosary because of distractions. I think it's more community prayer.
That the rosary is a community prayer, therefore? Is that what you're concluding? Okay. This lady is saying that some people experience, and she said she's one of them, and I would agree that there are lots of people with your experience that have trouble with the rosary, that is, with distractions during the rosary. And then what I've not heard before is you're drawing the conclusion, not that you're wrong, it's an interesting conclusion, that therefore you view the rosary as not so much an individual prayer as a community prayer, presumably because you'd be less distracted. Is that it?
Yeah, because I wouldn't say you will give it up and you give up rosary. You've done prayers because of distraction. But what we were trying to say is I think it's better to have more people say the rosary with you.
Yes.
Than by yourself.
Yes, okay. And she thinks that it is better, because of the distraction problem, maybe other reasons, to have a number of people say the rosary together. Now, that might well be, and for those people who can be together, great. But there are a lot of people that couldn't be with others for the rosary. Some say it as they're driving their car home from work, for example, and unless it's very troublesome traffic, you can pay fairly good attention to it individually. So I would say if it helps a person or a group, fine. And certainly family rosary is a good idea. There's no doubt about that. Okay?
Do you have any suggestions on how you can pray the rosary by yourself without too much distraction?
Okay. Are there any suggestions about saying the rosary by yourself and the distraction problem? See, yes, I do have a little bit to say about that. See, there are different ways of paying attention to the rosary. One is, the first way, the obvious one, is to Hail Mary, and I think of her, full of grace, sinless. So, and now, to do it, you couldn't do it quite that in detail. You'd take a long time to say the rosary. But in other words, to attend to the words that you're saying, that's one kind of attention. Another kind is to attend to the mystery, of course, the resurrection of the Lord. Or one of the others. There's still another one that I think is also valid and proper. If somebody has a deep contemplative prayer life, they can have, while they're saying the words of the rosary, have just a desire for God, a wordless desire for God, as they're saying the words. I think that's a good way to attend to the rosary. That is, to pay attention to it. Or I'm hesitating because if it's a deep absorption that you've got, I'm not so sure you can say the words. See, in that case, if you have that problem, that you're in the fifth mansions of your contemplative prayer, and you're deeply absorbed with no distractions, and you can't think of mysteries, well, blessed are you and your problem. You see, that's great. I think I would then just rest in what the Lord's giving. It won't be real long. That fifth mansion absorption is not real long, and you probably will be able to attend to the words or the mystery or just a loving awareness of the Lord or a desire. See, these are all ways of being in touch with the Lord during the rosary. Okay?
This is has to do with what Carol asked before, with the distraction. I think, and I'm asking you to agree with this, because I'm in a position of sometimes giving advice with regard to information, that, okay, what are you going to have for breakfast is a distraction, clear and simple. But not everything that people call distraction is a distraction. Like my friend's brother is dying, and she's working her way through a scripture that she's meditating on while she can think about his brother dying. I don't consider that a distraction. I tell her to drop what she thinks she's meditating on and make her prayer time, I don't know, acts of faith in God's will or something like that. Because I don't think you can fight that sort of thing. I don't think something like that is a distraction.
Yeah, okay. That's good. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I really should have said that in connection here. You can also have the intention for what are you praying as you say the rosary. Now, in your case, where somebody's preoccupied, my brother's dying or my sister's dying, and I can't get that off my mind. And yes, I think then it would be a very good example of, well, turn your prayer to that during that time. Okay? Now, thanks for bringing that up. Good.
So what about with the office then? You gave
recommendations for how to combat distractions, seeing the rosary, how about during the office?
Well, see now with the... Okay, well, let's take the office first. So it's morning prayer, the liturgy, the hours. Would that be a good example? Okay. See, I think the problem with distractions, it's still there, unless you're deeply absorbed in the Lord. It's still there. I think it's a little easier to reckon with because there's so many different ideas and praise and adoration, all kinds of things, and so much variety of the types of prayer and the wordedness of it, that it's a little easier to come back right to the text and just advert to the text, you see. And by the way, in the praying the Psalter, and much of the office is the Psalms, as you know. You see, even if a particular psalm or a verse in a psalm doesn't seem to fit you in your circumstance, remember this is the official church, the prayer of the universal church. So it fits a lot of people right now, even though it doesn't fit me. For example, there are psalm verses that speak with my gray hairs or something, you know. Suppose you're 18 years old and you ain't got no gray hairs, you see. But a lot of people in the church that do have gray. I'm not speaking because you asked the question with no gray hairs. Wow. So one way we can handle distractions with what's going on in the Psalter is to realize I'm praying officially in the name of the church here. And that's a very beautiful thought, that we are in union with all kinds of people all over the world in the body of Christ. And so that unites me with them. So I think, and again, be patient with your distractions in the liturgy of the hours, as well as in the rosary. Okay. Now with that, the other one, distractions during meditative prayer. I think my main contribution there would be to repeat the patience and then just come back when you realize that you're distracted peacefully, just to return to what you were doing, or if it's contemplative prayer, to what the Lord is giving. See, you understand, I'm sure that, okay?
How do you know the difference between you're willfully allowing yourself to be distracted and not?
Yeah, what's the difference between willing and not knowing? So that's the question. What's the difference between a distraction that is willed and one that is not willed? Okay. See, by definition, an act of free will requires knowledge, therefore advertence to the thing, and our consent to do it, or our decision to do it. See, so that, let me take an example from the experience of impatience. Impatient feeling, somebody annoys you or bothers you as you're working at something, and they're just bothering you and they have no good reason to talk, and you feel annoyed. That is not willed, it's simply that because you experience it. And a distraction is not willed simply because it pesters you or you experience it. Willing comes in when you advert to what's going on and you with freedom pursue that. So if somebody annoys you as you're working, or during prayer time, it happens in some parishes that people talk after Mass and you're trying to pray and they keep talking. Sometimes out loud. Okay. That, of course, is annoying. Now, see, there's no will, and it distracts me. I have to admit I'm distracted when this is going on. I'm not used to that. See, so that I've not committed any sin or any fault at all that I feel annoyed. Now, if I knowingly realize I'm going to give them a dirty look and I turn around. Okay. Well, now it's an act of free will, and now I might be rude myself. You see about that. But so there has to be advertence, knowledge of the thing, and then the decision to do or not do whatever you do. And it's like that with distraction. Well, that is a distraction. Okay? Did I answer your question now? Okay, fine. Okay, any other? Okay, let's... Oh, fine.
We're getting a little field of what I want to ask originally, but would you consider, number one, would you consider a distraction a solution that comes in contemplative prayer that you were trying to come to at other times when you were working things, when you were in supplication?
Mm-hmm.
And number two, do you think journaling is
Okay, fine. 2 questions. The first one, let me repeat it, see if I've got you correctly. Would I consider it, or would one consider it, a distraction when, in contemplative prayer, a solution comes to your mind of something you've been thinking about or wondering about outside of prayer time? Well, I guess you would call that a distraction in the sense that your mind is now on something else, but I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. What I do, I've been carrying around little bits of paper about this size. I just used one a few minutes ago about something else. But I carry these around. I've been carrying for decades. I won't tell you how many. But what I would do in that case is so that I can, when I take out this slip of paper and I write down the thing that what my solution is, and now I put it in another pocket so I'll find it there. And then the distraction for me then goes away. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now the second question: is journaling a benefit for contemplative prayer? Is that what you? Okay. Let me begin with Saint Teresa on this. She has a remark. She didn't use the word journaling, but she makes a comment. It's typical of Teresa. Bang, and right on target. She makes a remark of people writing down their prayer experiences, and she doesn't think much of it at all. In other words, she doesn't advise it. And I'll get to answer your question further. I'm not downing it necessarily. I'm just giving her remark. So she says that there are people who write about their prayer experiences, and she thinks it's useless. She says, if you have a real experience of God, you won't forget it. That's basically the substance of what she said. Okay. Now, however, I don't think that necessarily means that journaling is bad news. I don't think it's bad news. The answer I give to that question, and I think if Teresa were sitting here, boy, if she were sitting here, I'd rather listen to her than me. But anyway, and I think she would agree with what I'm going to say. Journaling, by its nature, is a means to an end. Writing is a means to an end. You do it for some other reason, usually. That is to keep yourself informed, or you want to check what you read a month from now, or check progress and so on. So my answer would be, since it's a means to an end, if it serves the end, then do it. But I would say don't do too much of it, and certainly don't be taking much of your prayer time for that. If at the end of prayer time, or once a week, or maybe, I don't want to get fastened on the exact times, but if it would further your progress in the spiritual life, including your prayer, then but be moderate about it. See, I wouldn't do too much of it. Okay? All right?
May I make a comment about
Yes.
what she said? I find that sometimes God leads me in a progression of steps, and that journaling helps me to go back and figure out, oh, that was one of those steps, and I'd forgotten that I'd taken that. So that when I get to a point where the light suddenly goes on, I can see, okay, how it's been leading me, how it's been building up to this light, and sometimes those steps are instructed.
Okay. And therefore, you're reviewing what you had written is a help to you.
Can I also ask a question about the divine office?
Yes.
Distraction. A lot of times that in praying the divine office, you get to a phrase, a line, and it seems like there are all kinds of images that just your spirit is just worshiping God through what you've read. It's hard to keep going. Are those considered distractions, or should you ignore them and keep going with the office, or is that a legitimate time to stop and just have a kind of one-on-one?
Okay, I think everybody heard the question. It's nice and clear and loud enough. Okay, so I'll just respond. I think that if you're saying it alone, or somebody with you that wouldn't mind, I think it's a good idea to pause and savor the Lord. And if He leads you into a contemplative awareness of Himself, or even a burning love, put it down for a while. He's the one in charge, you see. Now, if you're with a group, however, then I would make an effort to stay with the group. Now, you might say, but my absorption gets so deep, I can't stay with the group. then, my dear, you've got a marvelous problem. and stay with your problem. It's very good. Okay? Okay, fine. St. Gertrude had that problem, by the way. Yeah. Okay, good.
This question may not be appropriate for what you're doing in the company position, but I wanted to ask a question about beginning again. The person who's just starting the road of prayer, I think those of us who've been here for a while, we sort of are familiar with the stages that John and Teresa tell us to expect, and the steps, and it's usually easy at the beginning, and then you hit the dryness and stuff. About the person who's made progress to a point and then really falls seriously, and months, years later, starts struggling back. You've been because you've already been through the honeymoon phase, and you've already been into the bride phase, but now you're coming back, and you're coming back looking with nose toward it all, and you can't expect to start with the vocal prayer that opens the way as you did before. Where do you begin again?
Mm-hmm. Good question. The best answer to that question, let me repeat it, just in case some may not have heard it in the back. The question is, suppose you have somebody who has progressed considerably in contemplative prayer and then falls. Serious sin. Loss of state of grace, and so on, and there are probably some mediocrity all tied up with that before or during and maybe after, and this person wants to come back. God has touched this person again, wants to come back. How do you come back after that when it's not the usual beginning, you see? Okay, is that basically the question? Yeah. I don't think necessarily that you would have to go through discursive meditation necessarily. It depends to where you are when the Lord touches you again, you see. Now, but the best answer I know to that question, it's in the book. Boy, I'd love to have Tobias with me here. I mean, the book. You see, it's a perfect answer. I'll just repeat it as best I can, though I don't know the text exactly by heart. And it's somebody that has strayed away from the Lord. Okay. If you return to him, this is a direct quotation, this part. Notice the if. If you return to him with all your heart, behaving honestly toward him, then he will not hide his face from you any longer. Well, that's almost a direct quote. See? Now notice that the key point, the cardinal point, the hinge point is if you return to him. Now that's always the case with advancing prayer. If I don't, by my decisions, I don't give God everything, I'm cranky when I should not be cranky, or I talk unkindly about others and I have no business saying that. If I don't correct those faults, I'm not going to return to him. Because I've divided my heart, and with a divided heart, by definition, you're not going to grow. You see? Okay, so the key to the answer there is, whoever it is, thank God that you've been touched and you're returning to him, you see. But return with your whole heart. And this expression, behaving honestly toward him, I think that means very much, if not wholly, W-H-O-L-Y, it means very much no rationalizing. Behave honestly toward him. Not just the appearances of it. Be the real thing, and he will return to you and hide his face from you no longer. Perfect answer. Okay? That is Tobias, and I wish I remembered. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm quite sure it's with Tobias. I don't remember the chapter for sure, but you'll find it. Yeah, okay.